I never thought my life would become so complicated. My name is Logan, a college student juggling the demanding task of working on my thesis. The process has been grueling. Long nights spent reading, writing, and rewriting with stress weighing me down every day. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't have imagined, was that the real challenge would not come from the academic grind, but rather from something unexpected happening right under my roof. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. It all began on a seemingly ordinary Friday night. After burning the midnight oil for days, I finally trudged home, exhausted and desperate for rest. The house was quiet when I walked in. The soft glow of the kitchen light spilled out into the hallway, casting long shadows. "Logan, is that you?" My stepmother, Evelyn, called out from the kitchen, her voice breaking the silence of the house. "Yeah, it's me," I muttered back, my voice rough from exhaustion as I dragged myself into the kitchen. I found Claire standing at the stove, stirring something that smelled incredibly delicious. My father, Thomas, was seated at the table, reading the newspaper as usual. "You look beat," he said, looking up over his reading glasses. I gave him a tired smile, running a hand through my messy hair. "This thesis is killing me," I groaned. Claire turned around from the stove, her face creased with concern. "Have you been eating properly? You look pale." I nodded, though my stomach betrayed me at that very moment, growling loudly. Claire let out a soft laugh. "Sit down, dinner's almost ready." "I appreciate it, but I think I'm just going to head to bed." "I'm completely wiped out," I said, shaking my head. "Are you sure?" Claire asked, her brow furrowed in worry. "You really should eat something." "I'm sure," I said, already stepping backward toward the stairs. "I just need sleep." "All right, good night then." I heard them both call out as I climbed the stairs to my room. As soon as I collapsed onto my bed, sleep overtook me instantly. I don't know how much time passed before I became vaguely aware of a presence in my room. In my half-asleep state, I tried to convince myself it was just a strange dream. But then I felt someone gently touch my hand. My sleepy brain struggled to make sense of what was happening. I felt my shirt being lifted slightly, and something cold brushed against my skin. The shock made my body stiffen, but I was so utterly tired and desperate for rest that I couldn't bring myself to open my eyes or even move. What happened next still feels surreal, like a moment suspended in time. But it's one I will never forget. A hand began to gently caress me in ways that were undeniably inappropriate for a family member. My body instinctively responded, even though my mind screamed in confusion and panic. My mind raced with questions. What was happening? Was this real? Was I dreaming? I wanted to speak out, to ask what was going on, but I couldn't. The weight of exhaustion held me still, paralyzed. A part of me hoped it was all just a vivid, unsettling dream. But the touch, the feeling was too real, too intense to be anything other than reality. It continued, growing more intimate with each passing moment. My heart pounded in my chest, and to my utter shame, my body betrayed me, reacting to the touch, even as my mind screamed that this was wrong. Just when I thought I couldn't handle anymore, when I was on the brink of forcing myself awake to confront what was happening, it stopped. I heard soft footsteps retreating into the distance. Silence. My heart was pounding in my ears, my mind racing. What had just happened? Who had been in my room? I wanted to get up to investigate, but my body was still too heavy with exhaustion. Before I knew it, I had drifted back into a deep, troubled sleep. When I woke up the next morning, the events of the previous night felt distant, like a vague, haunting memory. Had it really happened? Or had my stressed-out mind simply conjured a bizarre fantasy? My stomach twisted as I stumbled downstairs, still groggy and confused. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, guiding me to the kitchen where Claire was busy at the stove. "Good morning, sleepyhead." She greeted me with a warm smile. "You must have really needed that rest. How are you feeling?" I stared at her for a long moment, searching for any hint that something had changed between us, but she seemed completely normal, humming as she flipped pancakes on the griddle, as if nothing had happened. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice slow and cautious. "Where's Dad?" "Oh, he had an early meeting with a client," Claire said, sliding a plate of food in front of me. "Eat up, you need your strength for all that studying." But despite her casual tone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Claire bustled around the kitchen, chatting about her plans for the day, but I barely heard her. My mind was preoccupied with the events of the previous night. Had it really happened? And if it had, was it Claire who had come into my room? I didn't want to ask what had I done. Was it a mistake to even bring it up? The thought of accusing my stepmother of something so inappropriate made my stomach churn. I finished my breakfast in a daze, thanked Evelyn and headed back to my room. Sitting at my desk, I tried to focus on my thesis, but the memory of those touches, whether real or imagined, kept intruding on my thoughts. The next few days passed in a fog as I struggled to balance my academic work with the confusion swirling inside me. Every time I saw Claire, I felt a mix of embarrassment, curiosity, and guilt. But she acted completely normal, as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until the following Friday that things came to a head. I had gotten out of class early and rushed home to work on my thesis defense, which was scheduled for the next day. I was so immersed in my work that I didn't hear Claire enter my room. "Logan," she said softly, startling me. "Sorry, I didn't mean to surprise you. I brought you some snacks. You've been working so hard." I turned to face her, my heart pounding. She was standing there with a plate of cookies, smiling at me as usual, but something in her eyes seemed different. Or was I imagining it? "Thank you," I said, my voice shaky as I took the plate from her. Instead of leaving, Claire sat on the edge of my bed. "How's the thesis going?" she asked, her voice gentle. "It's okay," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "I'm just really worried about the defense tomorrow." Her expression softened with sympathy. "Oh honey, you're gonna do great. You've worked so hard." Before I could react, Claire moved closer. Her hand rested on my shoulder. The touch sent a jolt through me, reminding me of that night. I couldn't take it anymore. "Claire," I said, my voice trembling. "That night, was that you in my room?" The moment the words left my mouth, I saw the change in her face. The smile faltered, replaced by shock and then guilt. "Logan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know what to say. And in that moment I knew. It hadn't been a dream. It had really happened. Claire had come into my room that night and touched me in a way that crossed every boundary. "We need to talk," she finally said, breaking the silence. I nodded, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. "We do, but not right now. Dad will be home soon, and you need to focus on your thesis defense. Can we talk afterward?" I wanted to protest, to demand answers right then. But she was right. I couldn't afford to be distracted by this, when my entire academic future was on the line. "Okay," I agreed reluctantly. The next day, I had my thesis defense, but the reality of the situation had already started to unravel everything I thought I knew. The morning of my thesis defense arrived with mixed feelings, of both anticipation and dread. On the one hand, I was eager to present the research I had worked tirelessly on for months, hoping it would pay off. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the anxiety and tension gnawing at me, knowing there was an uncomfortable, unresolved conversation waiting for me at home. I barely tasted the breakfast Claire had prepared for me. My stomach was twisted in knots as I stared at the food in front of me, trying to appear normal while my mind raced. Claire moved around the kitchen with an air of forced cheerfulness, trying to maintain the illusion that everything was okay. But I could see through it. The strain in her eyes. The weight of everything she was holding inside. The thesis defense itself went by in a blur. I presented my research, answered questions from the committee, and defended my conclusions. Somehow, I managed to push aside the personal turmoil in my life and focus on the task at hand. By some miracle, I came out of it feeling accomplished. "Excellent work, Logan," my advisor said with a warm smile. "You should be proud of yourself." I should have been ecstatic, but instead a deep sense of foreboding filled me. As I made my way home, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that everything was about to change. When I entered the house, Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, with 2 mugs of steaming coffee, her face a mask of anxiety and remorse. She looked up when I walked in, but her expression softened into one of concern. "How did it go?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Fine, I said, my voice tight, reluctant to engage in any conversation. That's wonderful, Logan, she replied, her tone a mixture of relief and guilt. I knew you would do well. Can we talk now? I couldn't hold it in any longer. The pretense of normality was wearing thin, and I couldn't ignore the heaviness in my chest. We need to talk about what happened, I said, my voice firm. Claire nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping. You're right, please sit down. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, wrapping my hands around the warm mug of coffee she had made for me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. It was as if both of us were waiting for the other to break the silence, to say the words that had been hanging in the air for days. Finally, I spoke, unable to hold back any longer. Why did you come into my room that night? I asked, my voice shaky despite my attempt to sound strong. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, collecting herself. When she opened them again, her gaze met mine, full of regret and sorrow. I don't have a good answer, Logan, she said, her voice trembling. I've been asking myself that same question over and over, but I can't deny what happened. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug nervously. The truth is, I've been struggling for a while now. Your father is a good man, but he's been so distant lately. Always working, always preoccupied. I've been feeling lonely, unappreciated, desperate even. That night, I had too much wine, and my emotions were all over the place. I thought maybe we could talk. But when I got to your room, you were already asleep. And then, well, I don't know what came over me. She stopped for a moment, taking a shaky breath. You looked so calm, so peaceful. And before I knew it, I was doing things I should never have done. I sat there, unable to fully comprehend her words. Part of me wanted to lash out, to accuse her of betraying my trust. But another part of me saw the pain in her eyes, the regret that seemed to consume her. It was a complicated feeling, anger mixed with sympathy. I'm so sorry, Logan, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. What I did was unacceptable. I betrayed your trust. And if you want me to leave, I will. I'll understand. The thought of her leaving, of our family falling apart, hit me like a ton of bricks. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and confusion swirling inside me, I realized that I didn't want her to leave. I said slowly, my voice unsteady. I don't know how to move forward. How can I trust you after all of this? Claire looked at me, her face a mixture of hope and fear. I don't know either, she admitted softly. But I want to try, Logan. If you're willing, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. We talked for hours, sorting through our emotions and opening up about our feelings. Claire shared more about her loneliness and how her marriage had left her feeling neglected, while I opened up about my confusion and the strange mix of emotions her actions had stirred in me. As we spoke, I began to understand her better. Not in the sense of excusing what happened, but in the sense of seeing her as a person, not just a stepmother. What will we tell Dad? I asked, as the conversation began to wind down. Claire sighed heavily, her face filled with sorrow. I don't know. Part of me believes he deserves to know the truth, but another part is afraid of what it would mean for our family. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision on my shoulders. The secret between us had become a heavy burden, and I understood Claire's hesitation. Maybe, I said after a pause, we don't need to tell him everything, but we should talk to him about the bigger issues. Your feelings of neglect, the distance between you two. That might be enough. Claire looked at me with cautious hope in her eyes. You think that will help? I don't know, I replied honestly. Maybe it will, at least a little. It might prevent something like this from happening again. We agreed to take things one day at a time. Claire would work on improving communication with Thomas, and I would focus on completing my college work. We both promised to be more open, to talk through our feelings and any issues that arose. As Claire stood up to start preparing dinner, she paused and looked at me, with a mixture of gratitude and lingering guilt. Thank you, Logan, for listening, she said. I don't hate you, I said truthfully. I'm still processing everything, but I don't hate you. She nodded, a faint smile on her face, before turning to the stove to continue cooking. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind replayed our conversation. I felt a strange mix of emotional relief, having cleared the air, and lingering confusion about my own feelings. I also couldn't shake the sense of guilt for agreeing to keep part of what happened a secret. The next few weeks were filled with an uneasy tension. Claire and I were hyper-aware of each other, carefully keeping a respectful distance, unsure of how to act. We both threw ourselves into our respective routines, me focusing on schoolwork, and Claire making efforts to reconnect with Thomas. But the weight of the secret still loomed over us. One day, I returned home early from class, to find Claire alone in the house. She was curled up on the couch with a book, looking startled when I walked in. "I didn't expect you to be home so early," she said, her voice filled with surprise. "The professor canceled class," I explained, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "Working late again," Claire replied, her voice tinged with frustration. I could see how tired she was, how much she missed him. Without thinking, I moved to sit beside her on the couch. "Are things not going well?" I asked gently, trying to reach out. Claire gave me a sad smile. "I'm trying, Logan, I really am. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough, if we've gone too far." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was genuinely trying to make things work, but it was clear that her relationship with Thomas was strained. "I'm sorry," I said, reaching out to comfort her. When my hand touched hers, I felt a jolt of electricity, an intensity that scared me. Claire must have felt it too, because she quickly pulled her hand away. "I should start dinner," she said, her voice trembling as she hurried to the kitchen. I sat there, my heart racing. What was that? Why did I react that way to a simple touch? I retreated to my room, my thoughts in turmoil. I had thought we were moving on from everything, that we could put that night behind us, but clearly unresolved feelings were still simmering beneath the surface. That night I lay awake for hours, grappling with my conscience. I knew my feelings were wrong. Claire was my stepmother, my father's wife, but I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward her, the way my body responded to her presence. I thought about Dad, and how oblivious he was to everything happening right under his nose. I thought about Claire, trapped in a marriage that was falling apart. And I thought about myself, caught in the middle of it all, confused and unprepared. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, walking on eggshells in my own home. I needed to get away to clear my head. I began packing a bag, thinking that some time away from all of this might help me sort things out. I could stay with a friend and focus on finishing my last few classes. As I zipped up my backpack, I heard movement in the hallway. Claire was up, probably starting her morning routine. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the difficult conversation that was ahead. I had to tell her I was leaving, and I had to explain why. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. With one last look around my room, I opened the door, ready to face whatever came next. Little did I know, the most difficult part of this ordeal was still ahead. As I stepped into the hallway, backpack slung over my shoulder, I nearly collided with Claire. She was on her way to the kitchen, still in her robe, her hair tousled from sleep. When she saw me, her eyes widened as she took in my packed bag, and the determined look on my face. "Logan," she asked, her voice tight with concern. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady, despite the emotions churning inside me. "I think it's best if I stay with a friend for a while." Claire's face fell, a mix of understanding and sadness washing over her. "Logan," she said softly, "is this because of yesterday? Because of us?" I nodded, though I couldn't meet her gaze. "It's not just yesterday, it's everything. I can't keep pretending everything is normal when it isn't, and I need some space to figure things out." She reached out as though to touch my arm, but then her hand fell limply to her side. "I understand," she said quietly. But can we talk about this first? Dad will be devastated if you leave without any explanation. In my rush to leave, I hadn't considered how this would affect Dad. The weight of it all suddenly felt unbearable.